Remember right here. But I still.
Sally gets to sit here. Good morning. Steve, I don't like when they change it up. I like having an assigned seat. Oh, I'm here. Okay, this is fun. Okay, this is great because
That's where we
I am. I will. Password in the network.
So it will come, it's still bubbling out.
it's just like
Yeah.
it's a lot in a month, right? 3 weeks. 3 weeks away. How long were they married?
You stole that 56 years.
Her dad was just the most unexpected.
Right. So she hasn't had any more. So.
There's a constant reminder, so Lisa had to constantly live it without saying goodbye herself. Yeah. Pansy, no, she applied to the new school and got it. Just moved there yesterday. Yeah, in Manhattan. Fashion design management. She's really happy.
I'm thinking that was just hanging out. I never set a date for that December to January meeting.
She loved her friends, but she and I put my coats. I think her mom was from the Bay Area. Her mom, who is from the Bay Area, I think oversold her on it. Like, I love it, and the program wasn't really what she wanted.
I think kids are really looking at
So we, not great communication from the new school, so we found out on like Sunday that Tansy had to move in, like orientation day started on Sunday and she just found out. So it was like move-in week was like a whole week ahead of what we thought, so it was like on top of Lisa's mom, it's just like I've got to like figure out how to get her into the city and then.
That's what I said.
Well, I may not be completely on my game today, so I'll ask for forgiveness in advance.
Yeah, no, Susan's still on top of this.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, she has been great.
And the report looks, very substantial. We did a lot this last year.
We did. We definitely did. She's good.
Yeah, I know. It's just like every time I say that.
Did the vision one go to waste? So this is the future development of the new is not a look back. And I said, well, you understand, I'm doing that too. It's like he said, got the door over there, right now. So that was like,
That's really disappointing.
Here's the heavy hitters here.
Hello, Steve. We're just gonna walk
They're
here.
very enthusiastic. They say they use very hard vision.
Yeah, we're on the like.
And they're great.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the, I have a lot of contacts in college that I think we can bring to bear. So we talked about maybe.
Good. Let's just keep, I need to keep an eye on my schedule because it's starting to really get packed up.
Yes, me too.
And
So
that time.
we need to pick
I thought
it with them. So
it seems like
this meeting so we can call down there and figure something out. Because I've got some stuff that I have to work with.
Had a really, I can get into more detail later, but we had a really productive conversation with Lauren yesterday, both around bonding and just sort of legislative initiatives. So she's super supportive. She's great. Yes. Yeah. So Kevin, I think we have a call with Kevin, like our line, just to talk about that. Like, what does that involve?
Well, it doesn't involve anything. It involves me making 3 phone calls. How's she doing?
My name. How are you? Every time I see you, the first thing I think about is lipstick. So bad. So we talked about lipstick, red lipstick here, and then I went over to meet with and company, and we talked about lipstick for the first 10 or 15 minutes. And then the meeting went for like over an hour, where it was scheduled to be a half an hour.
Which is
How's your
funny
boss
because
doing?
you know Secretary
I know.
Evans doesn't wear any makeup.
No, I know. But she was really interested in this, like, June.
I know, and I think that's
I can't be
why.
trusted with lipstick after I told you about my name.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So my lips were chapped.
Everybody who's not a member of the public is welcome.
And I'm walking to the meeting and everybody's looking at me and I get to the meeting and I'm just speed as shit today. Like I just have it so pulled together because every time I talk, everyone's staring, everyone's paying attention. I leave the meeting, everyone's looking. I'm like, hey, hi. Like I'm picking them. I get into the car and I look in the rearview mirror and I put it on like a clown. I didn't realize it was a tinted chapstick, bright red, and it was like all over.
Well, you're an archaeologist. It's okay.
But nobody said like, hey, are you? Like,
I would have said something. I'm the first person, like, yeah, I love it when people tell me, like, lipstick on your cheek. Like, I think every colleague of mine says that to me because it's the thing.
So now I try to stick with very neutral tones because I can't be trusted with bright colors.
How is Secretary doing? Good. Yeah. Yeah. Everything. You know, every time I hear her, like everything seems not slowing up.
We try and keep it that way. But yeah, no, you know, I mean, if it wasn't for like the everything
Except for
would be
that.
great.
Except for that, right? Well, and that's just been going on for so long. Yeah, that's interesting.
So, but
Smart enough.
yeah, we're trying to be as proactive as we can.
I came from Texas, so I'm
No,
I moved away and moved to Connecticut.
It's a different bar. It's a different bar. So good. Okay. Send her my regards. I will say, I rarely send her an email, and sometimes I do, and it's just like, I thought you might be.
I think people,
Not
but
about
I don't want to start with that.
literally gets back.
I think people
She's
Really fast.
She's very responsive, and I always tell people, and she always tells people, you know, feel free to email me.
I don't know how she really does it, and most people just must have read it.
Playing the don't leave too early, don't leave too
Because
late.
that's what I literally feel like my job is basically to answer emails and then to do things that other people like. Food facts are there all the time for. That's really how
I'm the OSH guest, and the capital, the password is CT Humanities with a capital CTH.
Okay, well that's good.
Everything is good. There's a lot. It's a lot. You know, early voting, starting,
Now that
tabulating.
the Republicans are telling
capital
people to
CTH.
vote early destination. Well, some of them are. Some of the time. Yeah. So. Fun. Okay. Well, good. All good. All fun. Yes.
Oh, I know. I usually wear.
What's that song when you say try not to fall down?
I'm so excited about it.
I get up again. Don't you feel like sometimes that's your theme song?
Except I don't bounce anymore. I don't bounce anymore.
Well, yeah, that happens. All right, I'll come around. It's a little hard to
Before pandemic, so it's so interesting this conversation.
I know it is. I know there was some sort of thing I was invited to last night. I didn't make it. Drinking. Yes, that's talk about his. You ever talk about his favorite? He said they're gonna go to this. Oh, I do. Which is my favorite. I live next door. Oh, yeah. The weather. Whoa, unbelievable. It's terrible. Yeah. I came here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You're the second person I've met recently that moved here from Colorado. Yeah, they moved here from Denver. And they said,
My ride here, my ride is pretty easy and then
Everything has everything.
quirky and then good. So I'm glad you weren't.
It's the guest, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, I'm teaching a course in this semester.
Yeah.
I have a trial of teaching it for during certain seasons. So that'll be fun.
So a little bit more of a laid backness than other
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So, yeah.
well, we're loving it. I definitely
Where are you living in the state? Yeah.
How does it drive?
That's crazy stuff. How did you do it? You know, and so they're very enthusiastic. It's nice to be around that. And the senior, I think we're really missed. But here's what I will say. Yeah.
Yeah. Have to drive a bit to get to one. Yeah.
You'll find a few old, worn out coaches here.
Yeah, my fault is there. Those majestic roads,
It's to encourage you to get out and take a road trip.
I think we're going to try to get started. We're almost 2 minutes late.
Oh, yes, okay.
Just kind of giving people a chance to get here.
Maybe I'll have like definitely. So it's so that's the
I got one for everybody.
started, everybody.
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm not sure.
You too.
Nice job.
Thank you. All right, everyone. If we could grab seats, please.
Great.
Wow, it's easily understandable.
Jason, this is Cindy. Cindy, the author of.
Oh, wonderful.
Nice to meet you.
I've seen that face.
Stay awake.
Looking good places. Certainly not a mugshot.
Oh, I see.
Georgia, I think they felt like this.
Is Amber's even still? Is she away? She's back. I don't want to record.
Yeah.
Oh, how about again? I saw that. Yes.
We kind of just figured out.
Get him online. The stories.
Oh, yeah, I saw
Yeah, he's over there. And he's trying to get online, but they didn't have the password. That's right.
Maybe all right, good. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I'm putting my phone on automatic pilot. You won't be disturbed when you're not.
Okay, I think we
in our building,
need to
aren't
get
you?
started.
Yeah, I'm right downstairs. I'm at, I know, like over coffee in our little
Already
Here. Good morning.
Good morning.
We're going to get started.
Love the way Troy brings things. It's really good.
Good morning. Welcome. Those of you who made the trek through the nasty weather, and for those of you online, thank you for being here. This is a meeting of America 250 Connecticut, the Connecticut Commission on the commemoration of the semi-quincentennial. Have I got that right now?
Yeah.
Of the United States. And this is, we've been meeting now for over a year, so I want to start out by just thanking all of you for being here again for this quarterly meeting and for all the work that's gone on over the last year. It's been a great effort, and it's been nice to get to meet some of you and see some old friends and make some new ones. So just thank you very much for your participation in this and everything we're going to do this year. We've got an exciting year coming up. This is the first meeting, obviously, of 2024. At the end of this month, we will present our report to the governor as required by the executive order. You'll see we have a draft of that report for you today. So without further ado, I will ask for an approval of the minutes from October 18th. They are included in your packet. Does anyone have any additions, deletions, changes? All right. If not, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from October 18th?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. Moved by Steve and seconded by Steve. All right. All those in favor of approval of minutes, please say aye. 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 Okay. Anyone opposed? No? Okay. Thank you. The minutes are approved. Next, we have a presentation this morning by Cynthia Parzak, who is with us here, from Connecticut Made. I'm going to ask Steve Hernandez to do the introductions because he is the one who has located her for us, and we look forward to an interesting discussion. Thank you. Steve.
That's great. Thank you, Madam Secretary. And in light of the new year, our new year together, I thought it would be so interesting to talk about some examples right here in the state of Connecticut of people who live in, are from, and do and make in Connecticut, as captured by this beautiful book called Connecticut Made. So I first learned, I'm going to turn to you in a second. We're going to style this sort of like a conversation, a bit of an interview, just to make it a little more comfortable. But I first met Cindy, or I learned of Cindy years ago when this is pre-pandemic. When she was doing a library tour of her book. And what she would do is she would go to libraries and talk about Connecticut Made. And what was, I think, so powerful about it is that, to me, Connecticut Made, just like the governor's new initiative about Made in Connecticut, it was a pre-pandemic love letter about Connecticut. So much has happened since then, and Cindy and I have talked often about how would you revise the book if you were to rewrite the book, knowing about everything that is, how Connecticut is changing, how the people who live here, work here, and make here have evolved. So that's been the subject of a lot of our conversations. But Cindy, I'd like to start just by having a conversation. Firstly, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Are you a native of Connecticut? If so, where from?
Born in New Britain, born, bred, and educated in New Britain. And then I went on to Trinity in Hartford as part of the first class of women. came out with a degree in art, and in '76 went to New York and was lucky enough to find a job working for Harry Abrams, the art book publisher, who had been sort of booted from the Times Mirror Corporation at age 70, started a new business, and I was the only employee. So it was a wonderful apprenticeship and introduction to life in New York City. And I went on, first on my own, to start 3 small book publishing businesses in New York, which evolved into 2. One, I eventually married somebody who was British, and we joined forces, and we ran a fairly successful small academic book publishing company that did also books for kids, travel books, and on lots of other subjects, all nonfiction and all illustrated books. I had the opportunity to move back to Connecticut after almost 40 years away, and worked for a very brief period as a senior editor at a publisher in Guilford, who approached me long after I'd left to do a book about Connecticut businesses, and left me to figure out a way to package it, basically, which is how this book evolved.
That's great. And, so much, and please feel free to join in the conversation, but so much about what we've been talking about and how it is that we celebrate 250 years of our country is how do we tell the story of our towns through the lens of each of our towns, the experience of our towns and cities. And one thing that struck me, Cindy, is the types of businesses that you happen to focus on in your book. Tell us a little bit about the decisions that you made in focusing on the types of businesses that you did.
Well, I tried to find businesses that I thought were thriving, because when you produce a book, you don't want to be revising it every 2 years, although it's good business to do that. Secondly, they needed to be businesses, because the whole premise behind this book was to encourage people to go out into Connecticut, find out some new things about this state where they live, and or use it to introduce friends who were visiting and new people, and to go out and buy Connecticut goods. So we needed businesses that either had a shop, a studio, or a factory that encouraged people to go in and visit. So restaurants were not necessarily on the agenda, but to also encourage this audience. I mean, I asked myself, why would people buy this book? So I organized it like something of a travel guide, with the purpose of encouraging people to go out and take a road trip, learn a bit about the history of this place, maybe just learn something new, and maybe encourage them too to start new businesses like these businesses.
That's great. A couple of us in the circle are relatively new to Connecticut. We're not natives of Connecticut, but in one way or another, we have either fallen in love with or really gotten to understand at least the dynamism of Connecticut, all of its towns, how different the state can be from one town to the next. And what I've also learned is that people who are from Connecticut and lived in Connecticut, my partner included, some of them haven't left a 5-mile radius from where they were born, right? It's just one town over to the next. So what's really remarkable is that your book has been an invitation, just like our experiment here is an invitation to both. It's an invitation to those who are new to the state to try and discover all the nooks and crannies of the state that we may or may not know about. But it's also an invitation for those of us who've been here for a long time to get to know our state much more intimately. Another thing I wanted to cover with you is you talked about pandemic. Tell us about some of the changes that you saw during during pandemic that are now inspiring you to revisit your work and maybe some of the conversations we've had here around the 250th birthday of the country?
I began researching this book in 2014, so we were just coming out of a very tough recession, which seemed to motivate lots of these small business owners to use what they had to survive, their old ideas, their homes from which to develop maybe a hobby or a dream they had, because many people had a lot of time on their hands, and take a chance. And since the pandemic, I've seen the same kind of gusto, and I think we're all feeling it. Just when we thought, oh my God, everything's shutting down, nothing will revive again, we're seeing a whole blossoming of new businesses. We particularly see it, I think, with restaurants. In Glastonbury, where I live, 20 great restaurants shut down, small mom and pop places. There are new businesses now replacing those businesses, and some of them are run by the same people who shut down. The same has happened in other categories of businesses. I think people had a lot of time to allow ideas to cook, to come up with a plan so that they could maybe make some money on the side while they were working at home, or to just have something to do if they lost their jobs, and to use that money that they may have received when they left their job to finance this business. And I think what's happened, these homegrown businesses have begun to move into storefronts and studios, and people are eager to welcome people back into their lives, in part because of the pandemic, but also to promote, market their businesses.
That's great. You know, there was a moment during the pandemic, or at least several moments throughout the experience, where the words resilience and pivot were repeated in different parts of our imagination and experience. And pivot really was a catchphrase for ingenuity, for survival, for creativity, for entrepreneurship. It was one way to say all of these things about Connecticut. And it struck me that during the pandemic, it seemed that things shut down. But that's when, first of all, legislators, the institution I am from, they went home to tend to their homes, which included their communities. The executive branch activated in ways that I have never seen it activate before, but I'm relatively new to the state, so forgive me. But they really did activate, and they went right into community. How do we find community? How do we find people using their language? How do we find the quiet spaces in Connecticut where people may be suffering? And what's interesting is that wherever we went, I started a series during the pandemic at the commission called Small Business Matters, because I wanted to highlight what small businesses were doing in Connecticut to pivot during the pandemic. And oftentimes you heard barbershops, you heard those small shops that made things and did things in service to people of the state, reactivating themselves in creative ways. So in so many ways, the pandemic has given new meaning to the idea of Connecticut made. Especially as we approach this experiment of 250 years, how are we going to tell the story of the future of Connecticut? And part of what it's shown us is the diversity of Connecticut, the diversity of what it means to be Connecticut made, whether it be the service industries, the industries that you covered, which are the actual bricks and mortars, but also the very people themselves that are Connecticut made and Connecticut strong. So Cindy, I'm so grateful that you joined us today, and I'm so grateful that you not only have written this beautiful moment that you've captured, but one that I hope will continue to evolve through your work, so that we can all keep telling the story of what it means to be made in Connecticut and to make it in Connecticut. Thank you. Are there any questions for?
I don't have a question, but I'm reminded it's making me feel kind of creative at the moment, and I'm thinking about how this relates to the work we plan to do. It's reminding me that one of our fundamental charges here is tourism, and how can we capture what you're talking about in maybe some sort of trails through the state? I don't know where we're going with this, but I can see some ways that we can incorporate in this idea that small businesses in these towns evolve out of other things. So that evolutionary process is interesting to me.
Well, you already have some of this that exists, chocolate trails and beer trails.
Right, exact wine trails.
It's time to maybe expand it a bit.
Right. I mean, there are some of those going on. The Rochambeau Trail comes to
Yes.
mind.
Yep.
But it's never been fully fleshed out, and it's been very focused on just historic sites, whereas maybe we should be thinking a little more broadly about how these towns have developed, in 250 years. So just a thought that I had.
I love that.
Anybody else is thinking that way?
I appreciate the tie to tourism because that is one of our important charges on this commission
Right.
in the work that the subcommittee is doing. We've also made a commitment to inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. And I wonder if you might comment a little bit on Black or Indigenous-owned businesses, if that's been part of your framing. At Connecticut Humanities, we have made a conscious effort to support Black-owned businesses and Indigenous-owned businesses where and when we can. Is there any area here that you could call attention to or that we could be thinking about moving forward and how we frame this or think about it?
I think it's difficult to find, in my research, brick and mortar businesses run by non-white owners. And why is that? Maybe like other categories of business in the state, it requires a bit more help. I mean, if I may not be right about this, but think about what happened with beer making in this state, which is such an important part of our tourism now. When I wrote this book, there were 50 brewers, small businesses, and a few large ones that were historic businesses here in the state, 50 years or older. Now it's doubled. And why did that happen? I think it's because the licensing laws, from what I've been able to find out, and the ability to open these kinds of business, the state made it easier. And I think that's what needs to happen with all small businesses, particularly those that I think play an important part in small communities, because small businesses, because they tend to be, if they're popular and the products are decent and good value, and even if they're not, if you like the owner, if you like the atmosphere and you like the product, you'll pay more for it and go back because you've had a good experience. So they bring people together in a community, and that's worth a lot in this state.
I think I'm thinking about the opportunity gap, and maybe that's less of a question for you and more of a question for this commission in terms of how do we help to close that? How do we create our work in alignment with state's efforts to move the opportunity needle, if you will?
I love that. We've had a lot of conversations about this, and part of the dynamic that I see when I think about how difficult it was to find this particular type of business owned by Black and Indigenous people in the state of Connecticut is because that access to capital, access to resource, access to land, access to a network, those are the things that we need to be intentional about when we're actually lifting up community. And one of the things that was remarkable about our efforts with the cannabis legalization and the businesses that flowed from it is that we really did try to be intentional about how it was that we took some of the resources that came from that to turn them back and put them back into community. That story is yet to be told. But the real point here is that we have to be intentional about how we invest in the people of the state. state. Otherwise, you won't see an evolution. You won't see those businesses evolving. I'm thinking of, there's a business here in Connecticut. This person happens to run here in Hartford called Express Kitchen. This is not a shout out. This is just a noting that there's a business in the state. But this was a Connecticut business started by an immigrant family that over the last 2 generations has spread throughout the Northeast. And they make kitchens, beautiful, affordable, sturdy kitchens, right? So it's the story of the American dream. It started with the wife owning a small hardware shop in the north end of Hartford, which eventually became the inspiration for Express Kitchen. That's one example of a business started by an immigrant community. Now think about all of the missed opportunities that we could be highlighting for communities that are emerging or emergent and have been here for a long time and have not had the access to network capital and resource that I think is critical. So that's part of the story that we can tell and what we are looking forward to in the next 250 years.
Yes.
Steve, you remind me of something I've been thinking about, which is I'm very conscious of the fact that I am not a Connecticut native. And when I moved here, I was conscious of representing the state in some way. And I wanted to do something like this. I had grand plans for going out and visiting and seeing all these things, posting on social media. This is something potentially the commission could do. If there's other members of the commission that are also new, want to learn about Connecticut, we could tie it in with tourism. We could come up with kind of a plan for come and go with us and learn about your state with people who are learning themselves. It's an idea. I'm happy to be part of it, but it's something I have been thinking about as an individual project, and maybe it's something some of us could take up together too.
That's a great idea. I love that. In fact, I've been thinking about ways that the commission members could participate in, some of the things we've been doing, like site visits, or, it could be certain towns or regions of the state. I think that's something that is a great idea and a good way to use the commission members to help us out, because there's only a couple of us and there's a long list of places we'd like to go. So let's think about that as a structural idea. And it also helps with publicizing the work of the commission, so it would be great.
And drawing attention to some of these businesses that we want to as well.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, thank you very much for coming. It's a very interesting connection there. And thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
For bringing it.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, we're moving on through the agenda. Next, we're going to have the national and regional update from Cindy and Scott and Jason. So, Cindy, you want to start off?
Yeah.
Cindy, to lead us out.
Hello, everybody. So just a very quick update on the National Commission. They have been giving a few updates. They've revamped their agreement with states. It hasn't changed a great deal, but they're offering a little more in terms of logo recognition and a website. Additionally, they will be releasing in the next 6 months a list of national programs that they're hoping to launch, and they're hoping that state commissions will help promote those. So as soon as we have that information, we'll get it out to everybody here so that we can discuss it at a future meeting. And then in addition to that, they are putting together a funding directory. So they're asking for state programs that might be of interest to national funders. And once we've submitted those, they'll be putting it together and sharing it with some of their contacts. So those are the initiatives that they're working on right now. And as we hear more details about that, we'll let everybody know.
Just to be clear on that funding list, there's no funding coming from the 250th.
Correct. It is really just a listing of projects that they're willing to share with people who might be interested.
In terms of ASLH updates, I just want to give a few here. The 250 programming handbook, which we talked about previously, is in progress right now. ASLH hired Kristen Gallus, who's an educator, to work on creating it. The timeline that they've established is to have it finished and ready to launch before Memorial Day in May. So it's an aggressive timeline, but they are moving forward on it. They have an advisory committee actually with people from across the country, and they actually asked me to be a part of it. So I'm helping give some guidance to that creation of the handbook. The first draft of the outline for it was shared with us last week and already gave feedback on it. And they're hoping to have a draft of the handbook itself by the end of January. So they're moving fast and aggressive. But again, this is to have a handbook for small to mid-sized organizations with low-cost programs but high impact to communities. ASLH continues to do virtual summits that will support their Field Guides 250 themes. The next one, if you haven't noted on your calendars, is February 8th and 9th, virtual, doing history in polarized times, to help all of us be able to navigate the political climate as we want to reach our communities with 250 content and history. And finally, the AASLH conference this year will be in Mobile, Alabama, September 11th through the 14th. They are going to continue to offer opportunities for folks that are joining and working on 250 in their states to gathering of the states. And there was actually some chatter in the base camp last week about additional opportunities. They want to make sure that they are the host and home for folks and the sharing of knowledge between our states. And happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Can you give me that date again for the meeting in Mobile?
The Mobile date is September 11 through 14.
Okay. Finally, a common cause for all, which is a convening that some of us attended last year in Williamsburg, Virginia, at Colonial Williamsburg, hosted by the Virginia Commission. Will be again held this year, starting Monday, March 18th through Wednesday, March 20th. Scott, Cindy, and I will be attending from Connecticut Humanities and representing this commission. Rob Krett attended last year. There's an opportunity for other commissioners to join, though funding won't be available to cover those travel costs. So that will be on either your organization's account or your own. Excellent programs and opportunities to connect with other commissions, learning about both the work of ASLH and their nationwide initiatives, but also the convening that's sort of shaping this broader initiative over the next several years. And Cindy will certainly be our point person on anybody who's interested in learning more or attending.
Any questions? Okay. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Virginia is playing an interesting role here, largely because they have a lot of funding that has come, I think, mostly from the state. We have not been that fortunate yet, but we're out there trying. We have a lot of legislative support, actually. So I'm hopeful that we will get some funding in this coming adjustment to the budget. It's more difficult to get funding during an adjustment year than it is an initial year, but we're hopeful and we're working on it. So I just want you to know that. Okay, so that brings me to our next item on the agenda, which is the draft of our report to the governor. We are required to make a report once a year to the governor, and thank you very much to Cindy again, who's done a wonderful job pulling together all the various things we've done this year. I'm very proud of this report. We have done a lot with a little. We have, and really it's thanks to the Humanities Council for putting this together, for being able to have the staff that we have working on this. And so thank you to Jason as well, obviously. So I'll let them talk about this a little bit, but this is we won't discuss it today, but I'd like everybody to have a look at it. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, you can send them to Cindy via email. We need to submit this by the end of January, I think it is, right, Cindy? So we won't go through it today, but it is just a compendium of everything that's gone on this year, including the subcommittee work that's gone on so far. So we hope to have a really firm plan in place, or at least I do. I haven't discussed this with anyone by mid-year this year, because now we're down to 2 years and counting. So we need to have a good, solid plan in place by mid-year this year. And so far, some of the subcommittees are quite far along, others not so much. So that's the goal for the coming year. But Cindy, you want to talk a little more about this?
Ariane helped with the writing of this, so I'll let her get started, and
Well, thank
then
you,
I'll take
Ariane.
over when.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we all kind of, put our ideas together on the governance subcommittee. And I do want to just take a moment to acknowledge all that has been done over the past year. I kind of wish that we all could have been working on this together, because it was just a really nice process to go through and kind of itemize out all the various accomplishments that we've had over the past year, and there are tons. So just want to recognize that as we look at all that still needs to be done. So going back to kind of this time last year, when we decided to delve deeper, or recognize the need really to delve deeper into our IDA work and ideas around inclusivity, that brought about the listening sessions that we all did and invited members of the community to. And then out of the listening sessions and out of other discussions came our values statement and vision for the commission, which I think really are now our guiding principles as we move forward. So a lot of really challenging work that was done during that period, but really vital. Then the commission bylaws, another kind of fundamental foundational aspect of the commission, going through those and adopting those in October. And then, of course, starting our thoughts around signature projects that we as a commission want to organize and promote moving forward. So began those discussions, and we'll be continuing those discussions, I think, throughout this coming year. That's kind of an overview of the commission work, and I think Cindy will go into some more specifics.
So I'll go into a little bit of the outreach and fundraising work that Connecticut Humanities has been doing behind the scenes, working closely with Denise and with other commissioners as possible. So we've been conducting site visits, interview with the media, participating in planning meetings, and all of those are outlined in the report that you received a link to. If there's anything missing, please let us know. CT Humanities established a 250th Leadership Committee, which is chaired by Jonathan Harris of Eversource and Sarah Harris of the Mohegan Tribe, no relation to one another. And they have been instrumental to helping us conduct outreach to municipal leaders, legislative outreach, and also connecting with various corporate contacts throughout the state, as well as foundation contacts. And that work is ongoing, and we are hopeful that through these efforts we'll secure $5 million in private funding and secure state funding to really bring to life the dreams that this commission has had. So this has included presenting to the Council of Governments throughout Connecticut, the Council of Small Towns, the Council of Municipalities, and in 2024, we'll also be looking at a calendar of events, revamping our website, which the Marketing and Tourism Committee is overseeing, and working with other partner organizations to kind of bring together different communities around the state. To date, we've secured $11,000 from 2 individual private donors and $135,000 from 2 private foundations. So we're looking forward to expanding these efforts. And we ask all of you to help us with making connections that will be fruitful in developing some of these relationships to bring our work forward. In the annual report, there's a brief outline of the subcommittee work plans that everybody has been putting together over the last year. I'm going to go through these very quickly, but really the engagement subcommittee has been working on thinking through how to engage a broad array of Connecticut residents and encourage community-based activities. The Education Subcommittee has been working on reaching out to teachers, educators, and administrators, using these people to reach families across the state and thinking about ways to get students to participate in this commemoration. Governance has been working on this annual report and really thinking, now that the bylaws have been passed, thinking about future projects that will be taken on by that subcommittee. We'll have a presentation later today by Merle on behalf of the IDEA subcommittee. We're really thinking about keeping this forefront within this commission. And finally, the Marketing and Tourism Subcommittee, which is really working on connecting with the Office of Marketing at the state level. And finally, within the annual report, there's a brief outline of goals for this upcoming year. So really building on the goals that we established last year, uncover and share stories that represent all the people of Connecticut, past and present, creating a community-based structure that will be used for commission work as we move forward, and then inviting the public to engage with the America 250 Connecticut themes. And so I invite everybody to send any feedback my way, and thank you all for all of the work that you've done this past year.
Thank you, Cindy.
Any questions, comments? Okay, as Cindy said, if you have any additions, ideas about the annual report, get them in soon, in the next week or so, to Cindy, and we'll see if we can incorporate other ideas if we need to. Okay, so that brings us to the IDEA discussion. As Ariane told us, we had a great deal of discussion earlier last year about the IDEA and the goals we have for that. So today, Merle is here, Merle McGee, and she can kick off this discussion.
I'll actually tee that up.
Are you going to do
from
that?
Merle.
Oh, okay.
So just sort of stepping back and acknowledging Denise's comments about the work that we've been doing with respect to inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. The conversations we've had to initiate some of our commission meetings. The charter of the commission by the governor was set up to have representation from different communities across the state. And yet I remain concerned about our success. I think we've seen different levels of participation outside of the commission, but also within the commission. And I would just call attention to the people who are not here today and who haven't been participating from the commission. And it concerns me. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to acknowledge this and think more deeply about how we're engaging our fellow commissioners and the communities they represent. John and Merle, who co-chair the IDEA subcommittee, have done a lot of work and put a lot of thought into creating a rubric for assessing the work that we do, both on the commission but also in the subcommittees. And there's been very little, unfortunately, there's been very little response to the rubric they've put together. So we wanted to sort of circle back and commit or recommit to our promise to our residents in Connecticut that we are going to do this work, that we are going to make some personal sacrifices and also recenter the commission so that we can accomplish this on behalf of the residents and citizens of Connecticut. I think I've covered some bases here, Merle. Can I hand it off to you?
Sure. Good morning. Happy 2024. Or 2023 and a half. I have no idea what's happening yet. We shall see. Anyway, really excited to have an opportunity to talk with you all this morning and to maybe do something a little bit different. than we have in the past to have that conversation. But what I wanted to sort of extend as reflections from both John and myself around the IDEA efforts that we've been engaged in was sort of the recognition of how difficult it can be to see things that we're not looking for. And by that, oftentimes we're moving forward in our efforts and our work, and we miss opportunities to reflect on how we're leaning into our values as we feel and believe them within ourselves, but then are challenged to live out materially, right? So I think it's always that challenge or tension around what happens, the distance between what we say we want and what we actually have. I often say that if these things were easy, I'd be, 20 pounds lighter and all the things, right? So, right? I mean, I think that's just the reality. But what we see is actual promise in that distance between our current state and where we'd like to go. And so with that, and in the spirit of that, because I think, Jason, you pretty much covered the point of red flag, to really just invite us into a very simple reflection and then conversation with a near peer, as we pair share, we like to call it. And anybody here do the Kagan instructional methodology? Okay, just me. Okay, Padea? No? Okay, no problem. But this idea of cooperative learning strategies that we use with young people work really well with adults as well. So we're going to do a little bit of that. And so really the opportunity here, is this going to show up on the screen? I have no idea. Okay, perfect. Is that we're going to do a simple reflection, just 3 minutes, maybe not even that long, let's say maybe a minute and a half, to ask ourselves the question, thinking about and reflecting on the work of the commission and your subcommittee over the last year, to explore internally on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being or not so great, to 5 being or really, really well. The specific progress that we've made in inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. And again, you want to be thinking, if you're thinking about access, is, ADA compliance, but what else would be included in access if you were thinking about communities that we don't normally engage or hear from or see reflected around tables like this. And so if you're not rating a 5, what commitments are you going to make to get to a 5? So we know that we've done a workshop and we've had some listening conversations. We know that there, have been some efforts to get us to think about within each subcommittee what are our IDEA considerations that we want to tap into, or metrics, and we'll go over that a little bit more later. But to think about that just for a moment, of self-reflection, and then I'm going to invite you to find a near partner to do a little pair share on that. Now, the goal here is not to beat ourselves up, but also to lean into the truth of the fact that we have a commission that is absolutely lacking in racial diversity. And this is not like I'm looking around the room.
It's okay, it's not a secret.
Right? And also that we haven't had a lot of conversation about what accessibility means or looks like for community members, who are people with disabilities. So that's the invitation to reflect. I see, oh no, that's something else. And we're just gonna sit here for a moment in silence of our thoughts. We can do it. And then I'll invite you into a conversation with a near partner. I'm just going to invite us to close that final thought in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Now, we're going to, there's an invitation, right, to turn to a partner and share. What I invite you not to do is to share, I rank it this way, right? I just want you to talk about, what are you curious about as the opportunity before us? And then what you're willing to commit energy and time to exploring or addressing that curiosity. So find a partner. Hopefully it's easy, preferably someone who might know what's been happening here. Absolutely.
You guys should split. Well, maybe it's best that you two talk.
And I love that everybody is eagerly jumping into conversation. I just want you to know we're going to take about 5 minutes for this conversation. And somewhere about the midway point, I'll just prompt to ask if everyone has had a chance to share, just so that we can facilitate that part. Yeah, great. Let's go.
Okay.
So,
Well, I mean, he
I'm
said, as they know.
Not as a point of time, but as an
and I think a couple things we recognize in this
The
issue.
curiosity I have is really what are
There's one thing that I thought
and what that means for now, what that means for the future.
And it's a very good time to do it because there's been great change. There are people coming in again.
Right, that's right. And then also,
I'm sorry, yeah, he teaches.
I have more
And he's
questions.
coaches. Because I thought
feel like we've had
with this, recognize me as chair, a piece of that.
Is either develop my own or contribute to developing like a little dog and pony show that I could go out and then, like I'm a librarian, so I can speak to library groups or library education, blah, blah, blah. Again, very, very white dominated on them. But I would need help developing like a dog and pony show that's useful and accurate as in terms of like what American 250 is all about, as well as like, I don't want to say sincere, but that acknowledges like, yes, you can automatically disqualify anything I say because I am the exact center of the bullseye of like all the privileges you can have. So like humility, things like that. But it's not like it's difficult, but I do find with this, with American 250, the ground kind of difficult. And I'm like, well, I was almost ready to do it, but I mean, I don't know, it's just not down. And we need, I mean, obviously, maybe it goes without saying, but we need to engage and get out so that we're not just doing echo chamber stuff into different groups. And it's going to be a lot of different things. Like, it's not going to come in the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You know, we're going to have to go out and get church groups on Sundays, or, I don't know, weird things we've never thought of doing. You know, family reunions at places like that. Things like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm on the education committee and it has been similar the last 2 years. We have diversified the committee. It's much larger than it was, so it's really good discussions. I think we're lucky in a way because we have these social studies standards, which are really good and are there to offer guidance.
Yeah, they're like a support.
Yeah, I think so, and things that we can key into. But we don't like have a parliamentary meeting really say we're committed to this. And I kind of think that would help to remind people and to remind candidates. I am curious about how people think about diversity because I think many people almost never think of accessibility.
Right, or anything other than race. Yeah, that's just American history, and it's not accurate.
Yeah, I think it's as an education committee, if we say people really understand what is meant by diversity, that would be helpful. I think we can have a lot of discussions with people local and international, but until it becomes real, it's not going to reach people. And I don't know exactly what I mean by that, but I think your idea of like a dog is really good.
I think the committees too have to get away from just talking about it. You know, like we could talk about it endlessly and talk about it. I really learned a lot, and then it breaks right out of those conversations. But it's exactly to your point, like when is it going to bite? You know? When is it? The rock is now pushed off the edge of the cliff and it's falling, and there's no way back.
And it's hard with the community stuff is just because it's been great people talking. And I'm on a committee called the Black Narrative Committee where we talk about who's telling what stories. And I think that's really important. Because everybody on the commission think about it. And actually what you said is exactly what I think. It's due. And not only get it out there, and then make sure that it's whatever.
All of those.
And the thing about it is,
Yes.
Then I guess the question is, how do you make it very, very helpful for the committees to deal with it? Because we would like to do that. But has not worked so small that it should be costing.
Yeah, it seems like an afterthought or something. Right. Yes, we dealt with that, and here it is, right, in this little thing without having any.
And I really think having conversations
Celebrate American Birthday. Some people want to criticize American genocide. Like, how do you write one statement on that? They don't want the state to speak in their name and say something they don't agree with. Right? So, from your perspective, this process, but it seems to me not like not to say that I'm not to speak any
Right, and there's other people, like my agents, who have been dealing with it for so long that they see this as like, well, this is like a step. No, so it's going to be very difficult.
It's funny because when I saw the commission put together things to do, Steve, this would be here. It would be serious.
We do have, like, we have folks, not very many, because we haven't pushed it out there so much,
But it's a great way to bring the room back pretty quickly and without a lot of noise. So hopefully you all had an interesting conversation. I know that Stephen and I did in exchanging some ideas. And it would be great to just hear some reflections about the curiosities that we want to lean into with commitments for this coming year. So, anybody want to share?
I'll share.
Yay!
So I have a curiosity. My curiosity is, what if this commission was disbanded and a commission was created, or still, I don't know, parallel commissions. But what if there was a commission that was seated only with BIPOC individuals? What would that look like? What does that free? What does this, you know what I mean? Like, what does it look like if that is the case? Like, what would the celebration look like? So I'm just curious about that. Just walk away, leave it in other people's hands to steward. I don't know that's not the final, but that's my curiosity.
And so that leaves me wondering, because the point of the inclusion is to include everyone, right?
It's not that it's a beginning thought to get to another, get to the other side. I don't know.
Right, and so I wonder then what kinds of commitments we could make out of thinking about, maybe we don't have all of the people that should be in the room. So, that's a curiosity that I think raises a question around what kinds of commitments could be leaned into with that. So
there's so much more with that we talked about, but
okay.
We'll leave it there for now and see.
That's good. I mean, I think the curiosity, gives way to, let me think about some things here.
Well, because I think a lot of it has to do with power and assumption of power, right? And so that's where I was going with it. Like, I'm not looking at Emerald, but what does a power dynamic say, right? So we have, if we want more people in the room, I mean, I have loads of other things like times of meetings and all the little things that we could potentially do, but the thing that I could do is talk to more people who I actually have already relationships with, to get insight, not to ask for work, to ask for personal insight. So.
Thank you. Yeah.
That touches on something that we were talking about too, and the difference between the commission as an organization and as a very large group of people versus the impact you have or the response you get when you're talking to individuals. Like asking for volunteers, if you just put out a general call, you may get a couple of people, but you have a lot more success when you go to a person and say, I see how you can help. I see how your perspective can be appreciated or added to the conversation. And so that was one of the things we were talking about, is how do we act as the organization and as the commission versus what role can we as individual commissioners play in moving some of this work forward? Because I think we're sort of stuck in the feeling of the large structure and the success that you have when you're working as a much smaller group and as individuals, and how can we maybe balance that more to get some response?
And are you thinking about that in the context of actual individuals, or maybe even taking it to a smaller group like a subcommittee? Like, as you think very specifically around what can my subcommittee do in this context? So Steve and I just had a conversation. I made the suggestion, maybe there's a youth listening tour that you want to do, right? So that you get more perspective from young people directly on the education sort of focus.
I think both, because I think even the subcommittees may be too big. You know, can we focus on micro intentions and micro kind of conversations versus the committee and the commission are doing this whole thing really large? I think that might help a little bit too.
You're battling some ghost over here.
I think we're trying to warm up.
Yeah. It's a radiator for sure. Yeah. And so then the curiosity becomes, what are some material steps that a subcommittee could do and an individual member of the commission can do, and what comes out of that? And I think, you know, as I've been sort of talking to people about the commission, it's really been as a part of relationship building, individual to individual, and so maybe there's something in there to pull, a thread to pull on that. Other folks? I know I saw Doug's hands moving, so that was anything out of this side over here of the room.
I mean, yes, it was a meaningful conversation. I do feel like in the community and organizational engagement committee, we've talked extensively about this exact topic, and these conversations have been very nuanced and very sincere and very productive and very enriching for me personally and professionally. However, everybody's still stuck at, okay, how, right? So I think for me, what I'm looking forward to doing and what I'm committed to doing is developing my own little dog and pony show. Maybe not my own little dog and pony show, but a little dog and pony show that's like approved by CTH and that is sincere and represents what America 250 CT is going to do. And then just getting out there to different groups, anybody that will listen, and even people that maybe won't listen, to explain like, hey, this is this thing. This is why it could be really attractive to you and really important for folks that you either represent or you're in a community of folks who were traditionally underrepresented or unrepresented. And just kind of from grass tops like this, trying to get more into the grassroots, but creating that path, I know for me has been a little challenging. So I'm really looking forward to hearing, you know, what everybody, the different paths that maybe everybody comes up with.
Thank you. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, we were just talking. I mean, I think the good thing, I think our subcommittee is a diverse one. I think in education, the power thing, people are it's not problems to get teachers to be on committees because they kind of do that. So, but that's not an issue. But I think an issue that Merle brought up is, you know, working through the traditional school structure is sometimes itself a challenge. So we'll continue to do that, most certainly. But I think at the same time, what we want to do is focus on non-school organizations, on perhaps on other type of groups. And I know, Ariane, you could suggest some for us, I'm sure, that would also provide, I think, to get kids sometimes out of that traditional school setting and into this, and sometimes not going through the traditional structures is the best. And that's ironic because I've worked my whole life right in that traditional structure. But, and I think too that the other thing is that, you know, we have to make this, to go through the traditional school structure, how do we make this relevant to, like, this is important to the district? You know, this is important. Where I think if you go to these other things, some of that doesn't have to be there.
Anthony would like to participate. Anthony, please.
Hi, folks, and Jason. I think your words were they certainly resonate with me. I had every intention of being there this morning. I'm now recovering from strep, which is one of the perils of having young children. And Meryl, I appreciate the question you've asked because it's one that I've sort of struggled with as I've been thinking about my own role and not actually having a counterparty in this room right now to have this discussion. I hope you don't mind if I share my own thoughts with the wider group. But it's an interesting question because, of course, you know, we're discussing the notion of perspective, and when I attend with local, there's actually quite an active group in my community around the idea of celebrating the 250th, and I see that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, Jason knows this, and maybe some others do as well. But you know, in our own professional environment, we actually support a symposium of local schools with 14 participating local schools who are studying local history through the lens of the property that we own. It's been really, really remarkable. Because even the idea, and I remember this from one of our earlier meetings too, the question, it really boils down to perspective, right? One group is celebrating the 250th, and the other group is, you know, is asking themselves, well, why? And what is the conversation around the 250th? And I don't want to revisit what we've already discussed, but I still personally kind of struggle with figuring out how to reach and then to communicate to disparate communities, the diverse communities, in which I don't participate in a regular, you know, on the course of my day to day, right? Can acknowledge this as much, you know, Meryl's looking around the room, you know, I look around my neighborhood and I say, I have the similar issue. I'd like to correct it. I'd like to correct it for my children. I'd like to correct it for myself. But in this instance, where we're not actually the organizer, right, where we're not organizing the event itself, and you're of course in support of those who want the pageantry. The question is how do you support the discourse? How do you also support the criticism? And how do you support the views that aren't necessarily celebratory, but offer perspective on where we live and what it is in its, you know, in the present construct and what it means to people. And so I think, you know, as a marketing subcommittee, you know, my level of engagement has been admittedly low, although it's not been obvious to me yet how I'm being asked to engage, and that's a poor excuse. But there is some validity to it, and I suspect that what I feel is I'm not alone in, and I think it's particularly difficult when you are an organizing body like ourselves that's really doesn't, you know, we don't have a date to pin on, and we don't have a, you know, parade to organize necessarily, or, you know, bunting to put up. But what we want to do is enable an entire state to engage over these ideas, or to feel okay in doing it. It seems to me that as a marketing subcommittee, our role is ultimately fundamentally to take the work of the other subcommittees and make sure that it's communicated and it gets into the hands of people who will find it useful and will do something with it. I think the other principal role is to more broadly tell our fellow citizens that it's okay to commemorate or to acknowledge this particular moment in our present in ways that accept other individuals and diverse perspectives. I don't know how to do that, but that, Meryl, is the result of my two minutes of solitary confinement over here.
Well, good job.
Thanks.
It turns out you're an interesting person to talk to, huh?
Well, that's fine. Thank you.
I love that.
Appreciate it.
No, I mean, and I think that, the question before us as we contemplate this is really, how do we lean into the both and what if our values that we are approaching this work with wants to underscore the importance of uplifting hidden stories and more inclusive stories, right? What does that mean in the context of how do we carry forward, how we even talk about this 250th? And what if we gave ourselves permission to say, in the conversations that we had in the various spaces, this is a commemoration and a celebration, and we see our ability to do that in the following ways. So leaning into the shared values of what the commitment has, what the commission has said as the pathway forward, and coming back to that commitment each time. Do we have time for one or two more reflections?
We have about Jason and I had an interesting discussion.
11 minutes. Great. So can we do one more and then we'll go through the deck? Thank you so much. Yes.
I started by looking back at something called the Civic Health Index that some of you were involved with. Everyday Democracy was one of the participants. And one of the very powerful lessons that came out of we did a poll, basically, of citizens from all over the place. And one of the findings we had, one of the questions we asked was, why do people join things? Because there's plenty of joining going on out there. Why do people get involved in things? And the answer pretty much was when they're asked in, when they feel that they've been asked in. So as I looked around this table, I don't see the complexion, basically, of the commission as the question as much as the empty chairs. And I'm curious about what would make people feel that they want to be part of something that they have been asked in. So that's one question that I had. And then Jason followed up with, we had quite a discussion about the thing I think we're all kind of asking ourselves, which is, how do we do that? Who do we ask? How do we get there? And I won't say a lot about it, but I will say from my perspective, I did it when I was running for office. When you run for statewide office, you get into every community because you need to get those votes. Now, I was lucky I had a statewide political party that helped me with that. But that's what I came away with, is how do we do this? How do we appropriately make everyone feel like this is a story they want to be involved in? Jason, you want to?
So, the really particular example that I shared with Denise is I'm involved in sort of an initiative reimagining UConn's Avery Point campus as a tribal college. Mm-hmm. And so myself and others involved in this from a leadership lens invited tribal community members from across the region. And every single tribe was there. They knew something was there for them. They knew that it mattered and that they had, I think to Liz's framing, there was power shared. They saw themselves in this initiative. And I think that making that kind of, there's a tangibility to it, there's a relevance to it. And I think that's the work in front of us. How do we get to that? There's got to be something tangible. We're living in the land of intangibles right now, and that's a little challenging.
Right.
I think we need to sort of find what are those things that we can do as a commission and as individuals that matters in a practical, lived way.
The material, yes.
We kind of talked about that intersection between what Anthony just shared, which is the why. Those of us who say, but of course why? And those who are thinking, but really why? And there's the story, right? The story of that conversation is the why we're doing this. But to this particular point, the authenticity of the invitation really matters. And to my point, to my mind, that's what creates the trust, right? And that means asking the participant, what do you want to derive from these conversations and this experience? What do you want to leave behind in our celebration of the 250 years? And I think that would really help in terms of being seen, seeing themselves in the way that you just described.
Thank you for that. And it leaves me with this curiosity. Yes, what is the material, opportunity to offer, particularly when people are balancing a finite amount of energy, resources, and time to expend on anything, the why. And we just have a real question that as an organization I'm grappling with, which is that there is a fundamental belief in the framework of democracy that is not surprisingly shared by folks that you think would share it. And the challenge, very frankly, was put to the group when we had the conversation about what to name a particular element of the work, the American experiment. And it was very clearly stated that for this business to be complete, for this democracy to realize itself, it necessitates the complete erasure or extinction, if you will, of the people that were here before. That is a tough question to lean into. I don't know how you authentically invite people into a conversation or a material, exploration and participation without being able to effectively and substantively engage the difficult questions of the actual work that we are seeking to do. And so it feels like it necessitates, a real deeper dive into those questions, because honestly, the interrogation of the fundamental premise of what we are doing is not going to go away without grappling with it. I think Baldwin said you cannot solve a problem that you are not willing to face. You may not solve every problem, right? I think was the beginning, but you definitely cannot solve a problem that you're willing to face. And I feel like that is probably a real challenge for the group to grapple with, because that may shape how you think about your messaging, how you think about your outreach, how you do all of the things that needs to happen. And thank you for mentioning power, because that's always the thing that gets left off the table. I'm not going to go through the. Oh, yeah, great. Great. We're going.
Michael, if you want to go ahead. Michael, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, hi. Michael Johnson from the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation. So this has been a good conversation. And Jason, you opened with, participation and lack of people in the room at the time. Now, I joined today, but it's, obvious I haven't, attended very many of the committee meetings. And, what's come up this morning is trying to, from an indigenous perspective, trying to answer the question is, what are we celebrating, right? And Anthony, you touched on that as well, and I appreciated those words as well. It's the very question that I've had to try to wrestle with, and then I start transitioning and looking at, what contributions Native people have made to the United States, worth noting, worth celebrating, if you will. And unfortunately, the first thing that came to my mind was military service. I asked my own father, who was also Pequot, why did you serve in the military? And he said, quite boldly, to prevent what had happened to the United States in terms of, potentially another occupation from happening again. So it's difficult, I think, for myself as well as perhaps other Pequot people, to try to be involved, I think. And for example, I'll give you another example why it's difficult. There's a sign here in the town of Ledyard that speaks to my people as being conquered. And we pass by it every single day. And so when I think of America celebrating 250 years, it's a hard thing to grapple with. And we've been batting around ideas, here at the nation with ways that perhaps we can engage, but we haven't quite got there yet, and we're still continuing to work on it. So even though I haven't actually been in the room there or been to many of the meetings, know that we are thinking about this, but it's just not easy to really answer. But I do appreciate at least, the efforts for sure to include all of the tribes, quite frankly, here in Connecticut, because we were all equally affected. And so if we can find or glean things to celebrate, perhaps the growth of the country and then trying to make things better for all of us, that might be one area that we can look at. But it's just difficult to kind of get our arms around a little bit to a certain degree. So I appreciate your time, and I definitely appreciate the committee and the work everybody's trying to solve. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. One more person with me? Yeah. Okay. Skip the deck.
You can go ahead and speak. I'm not sure. Is the audio coming through?
Is that, are you referring to me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'll keep it brief. Michael, thanks for that. My own perspective is as an immigrant. I'm an immigrant to the country, and I was naturalized in the state of Connecticut, which is a pretty cool experience. Particularly interesting, because I was done at, I think, at Loomis Chafee in their auditorium, and all the students were sitting there, 300 and some odd of them, observing us all as we swore an oath, and pretty diverse, incoming class, as it were, of new citizens. And I wonder if, in the context, you sort of, one of the things that happens and a long time resident, first time citizen. It was one of the things that ultimately happens is that the sort of the weight of history comes pretty quickly alongside of that, and it happens regardless, whether or not you're citizen or you're first generation or multiple, you've been here, your people have always been here. We do carry that around, and I just wonder if there isn't something that we could do, and this is an idea. There are going to be a number of citizenship ceremonies that will take place all over the state of Connecticut over the year. It'd be interesting to figure out what one might say to those people and what one might ask of them in how they would think about the 250th and what it meant to them as on sort of the anniversary of their first year, sort of thing. I think there's something there, and there's sort of that fresh eyes that also come with folks who are optimistic about being here and about the future. They're opting in, and for a reason. Anyhow.
Thank you, Tony. So I think what I would just leave us with are a couple of things. There is a deck that's going to come out to you that actually has broken down the work that John and I did over the summer to put together just sample metrics to measure your efforts in your various subcommittees against, and also a simple outline for what would be considerations to assess any proposals that we received from community members looking for, I guess, endorsement or resources as those things become available from the committee. And the invitation to you all is to take a look, reflect on them, and offer feedback on where you think the metrics hit the mark or metrics that are missing that we should be thinking about for those various subcommittees. And then to offer feedback also on the assessment questions around proposals. So it's going to be in a document that Cindy's going to send out. We would have kind of reviewed it, but you all have the ability to read. So we won't waste our time in that regard. But we do ask that you engage with it, and because the work that I do, I'm always looking for deadlines. So hopefully that will go out with sort of a window of commentary period so that we can go back and revamp and strengthen the document, and then make it available for the subcommittees to engage in. In addition, John and I are eager to have two things happen. 1 to 2 people inside of each subcommittee take on the idea, hat, mantle, mantra, whatever you want to call it, cheerleading, and to regularly engage with he and I around how we can be supportive. Honestly, I kind of do this all day, every day. I'm thinking about this stuff. So happy to be supportive. But he and I know we can't go to every committee, but we know that if it's not just about one committee holding it for the entire commission, but diffusing that responsibility across the entire commission. So that is ask number 2. And then I just wanted to underscore and thank Mike Johnson for what he said, because it is exactly the question that if we do not grapple with the question about why and what needs to be addressed we're going to be sitting here next year having this same conversation around how do we fundamentally transform our own thinking around inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, and this bigger question of we've got a little bit of a PR problem with this whole business of this commemoration, and I think we need to kind of be honest about that and face it head on so that we can be more effective in creating the kind of celebration and commemoration that we all have signed on to do. So with that, I thank you for spending time on this conversation. So much appreciated.
Thank you, Merle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Merle, so much. It's a big question, and you're right, we will continue to talk about it, and you're going to see in this next thing we're looking at here, the next subject on the agenda is the conference, Declaring Freedom Conference. I just want to draw your attention to it. I hope you will all participate. It is a 4-day extravaganza, if you will. I see it's not technically a commission event. It's funded by the Humanities Council. It is being hosted at Central, and it is an education conference. It is started out being a 2-day conference for students and teachers. It's being put together by Matt Warschauer, who some of you know is a history professor at Central. And then it grew into something which our involvement will primarily be on day 3, which we started saying, well, if we have all these students and teachers and others interested in this at the same place, then let's get everybody involved. Let's invite institutions who might be interested in the Declaring Freedom issue. And so the 3rd day of the conference, which is Friday, March 15th, will be sort of the commission's day to get together. So I hope you will all put it on your calendars now and hopefully be able to attend. And it's you'll see there's a 1-page description in here, but make sure you look on the back, because it made me realize that, again, if you look at some of the subjects of the workshops that are envisioned for this day, so there'll be an overview of the commission. The governor has been invited to attend and address us. So we'll be talking about commission business, but essentially in the afternoon and even in the morning, there are panel discussions on things like the one that caught my attention after our current discussion was at 2:00. Panel discussion for the common good. What forces were at play in the founding of our nation, and how are we still struggling to live up to the ideals that were outlined 250 years ago, which is essentially what we've been talking about. So, Cindy, do you want to say more about this? I invite you all to help us think about panelists. I know that Matt is working on this, and I don't know how far he has gotten. Steve, do you know any more about this? Who's going to be on these panels? I really haven't talked to him lately.
I don't know that. Yeah, days 1 and 2, we've invited 15 schools. And intentionally all kinds of schools from all kinds of places in the state. And we're going to have discussions on what is freedom, what kids think freedom is, and how kids can relate to these larger themes of history. We're also going to have a special professional development, so the teachers coming aren't just sitting around. We're going to have different sessions for the teachers involved. So I think, and if anyone would like to visit either of those days, that's certainly great. And the 3rd day, Matt is Matt helping with speakers on that?
So we do have a list of speakers for day 3, but I invite anybody to submit any other ideas. We were hoping to get a little bit of feedback on these big picture questions that we submitted in here in this proposal, and then any speaker ideas, and we'll be refining it most likely by the end of the week so that we can start to get those requests for speakers out.
And I assume, Cindy, you'll be getting out invitations, formal invitations to everyone to this. And you know, I don't know if we will be inviting the legislators and the municipal contacts that we have so far. We don't have a contact for every town yet, but we're going to be working on that. And other, you know, cultural partners, tourism partners, and so forth. But if you have other names that you'd like to submit as people who might like to attend, please feel free, you know, right? So I don't know how much room we have at this conference. I don't know how much space. What's our target audience? I don't know.
If I remember correctly, the limit is about 200 people, so quite a few.
Yeah.
We're looking to have a moderator and 3 panelists on each of these panel discussions, and are looking at a pretty wide array of speakers from the historic perspective, community leaders, artists, and are trying to really broaden out what we're talking about when it comes to the 250th.
Okay, any questions, anybody?
It just strikes me, it's a really good, just in light of our last conversation, it's a really good time to talk about, I mean, declaring freedom is really, like, I do think it's big, but, you know, there's lots of people who are still not
feeling it.
I mean, so
yeah.
I don't know if the name is good, bad, otherwise, I'm not sure. It certainly raises questions about, in my mind, even though I do see, like I see a question, you put a question mark in there and maybe the whole thing changes a little bit. I don't know, but.
Well, maybe we should all go to the conference and hear what's being said. I think it would be.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I just want to make sure it's just not us going to the conference, because then we're just hearing what we want to hear again. So it's just a thing I throw out to the ether, because, you know.
Is this going to be ticketed? Like, how is it? I know you guys are funding it. Like, is there going to be a registration fee? Like, how is that going to work?
I believe that because of the sponsorships, it is all free. There will be some kind of registration, but I don't think there's any cost associated. And we should have all of those details within the next week as we kind of solidify what the promotional materials look like.
Okay, moving on, subcommittee reports. Amorous, it looks like you're first.
I'll first. Well, I guess, you know, I think I'm really gratified that we had the conversation facilitated by Merle that we did today, because these are conversations that we've been having at great length in our subcommittee. You know, I think in terms of the concrete work that we've been doing, we're putting together and have the framework for a spreadsheet with, you know, organizational and email contacts to help facilitate the outreach that CTH is going to be doing on the commission's behalf for messaging and identifying sort of points of contact and the sorts of local and community organizations that can really help us get the word out. But I guess, you know, in the absence of anything more to report from what we've been doing, I just want to share a little bit about the conversations that we've been having, which at our last subcommittee meeting really grappled with the entire framing of 250 and the fact that there may, like, that the framing itself is one of the things that may be tripping us up in engaging the people that we want to feel that they belong on this commission and have a voice on this commission. In the conversation that I had with Liz in our share out, I was thinking about your idea about a parallel commission or something. My parallel question, I guess, as a historian is, what does the story look like? What is the framing that we would not come up with in a white-led organization of this moment? How does the story change if we add like a plus to the 250? Like if it's 250, if it's not just 1776, right? You know, there's something about the periodization that is a turnoff to other groups. It's not the date that everyone would pick, right? So I think that there's this ongoing struggle about meaning making that I think we're confronting as a commission, and we've been having a lot of great conversations in our subcommittee about the issues. I wouldn't say that we've been successful in thinking about what the action steps forward to overcome those are, but I guess I just wanted to share that we've been grappling with a lot of these challenges around the entire framing, which is not to say we need to scrap it and jettison it, but that there is a potential disconnect that is hampering us between the concept of 250 and the people that we really want to bring to the table. And figuring out how to bridge that gap, I think, is really critical. And I think a lot of it has to do with just meeting making. So in lieu of a subcommittee report, I wanted to soapbox on that for just 2 seconds. I would invite others from the subcommittee to share. I mean, we've had really great conversations that have helped me a lot in my thinking around this, but don't have the answers.
Of course
and
not.
I look, you know.
That would be too easy. I think you're asking a very interesting question personally when you say, what would it look like? What would be different? What would that look like? Not what doesn't it look like? And so maybe we need to have some time to think about that. I don't know.
And we may not be the ones who can, I mean, I don't think
Well,
we're
yeah,
the ones who can answer that question. I think
Right.
that's potentially the opportunity for engagement is.
And many other groups and institutions are struggling with this exact question, by the way, not just around America 250, but around, America in general. I mean, what does it mean to be American? Am I part of America or not? And all those questions. So we can't fix every problem, I guess, with this commission, but we can certainly think about that. It's almost from a marketing perspective, isn't it? I mean, because words matter.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to, if anybody has any good ideas around that, maybe we'll talk about it at a different date. Today is not the time, but we'll take that under consideration. Okay, education, Steve.
Yeah, on that issue, rightly or wrongly, what we've decided in the education committee that we will 250 as obviously 1776 is a theme, but what we're going to, our job is to provide, one big part of our job is to provide teachers at all levels from grade K to university with materials. So what we perceive our mission to be is to start with 1776, but how those ideas of 1776 and the ideas of the Constitution and the Declaration have been affirmed and challenged over the period of American history. So that's what we've decided, rightly or wrongly, that's what we want to provide for students, is over the course of history, those documents, the ideas in those documents, again, how have they been affirmed in times of history? How have they been challenged in times of history? That's sort of what the Education Committee sees its charge being. A practical charge being, which we'd mentioned, I mean, we'd love to get, how we have to work harder to get students involved in this, because we haven't been able to do, I mean, we haven't, but we gotta work harder to do that. And I think we talked about a couple strategies on how to do that today. I don't know if that's the right approach, by the way, but I think rather than just do the celebration of the initial thing would have a limited impact, I think, in schools and limited interest. I think this is going to give more bang to the buck if we can tell the story of those ideas over time. I think that would be more attractive to students and to educators.
Can I ask a question? This is not for now, but a consideration that certainly my organization is thinking about as we engage in truthful community dialogues. How are we preparing for what could be a range of, we don't like it, that you're trying to be more inclusive, on one end of the spectrum to we're going to absolutely disrupt and stop it, having more inclusive conversations, particularly in the education space, which, as we know, is highly contested. I'm using contested politely because it's not really, right? But you know what I mean. And so in terms of the commission, what is our obligation to be thinking about and preparing for those kinds of challenges to the work? Just throwing that out there. I think safety, security all the time.
Right to be concerned, and we have thought about that a great deal, actually, and I would imagine the Education Committee has also been grappling with that, knowing some of the members who have come forward and been actually involved in some of the disruptions out in the school districts directly, so they're very familiar with the problem. It will be, I don't know, Steve, I'm sure, that's what we're counting on the subcommittee.
That approach that I described, that, the ideas, how they've been canned, that's not going to be a winning argument with every parent in Connecticut. How about that?
Right.
And so how one navigates that. I'm assuming this commission is not going to get engaged in writing curriculum. I mean, that's been, from the beginning, we decided that.
We will be, I think our committee sees its role as curating effective, in most cases, material that's already out there.
Okay, yes, so I assume we'll have some sort of plan with some ideas on exactly how we're going to proceed by April.
Yeah.
From the education. Okay, great. All right, marketing.
So Rob Kretz sends his apologies for not being here today. Marketing right now is working with the state to redevelop the commission's website, really focusing on the public-facing parts of the website and what we have to provide, and making all of the information that we have easily accessible for members of the public, and thinking about how we'll be able to share events through partnering with them on this website moving forward. And in addition to that, just thinking about how to best engage the business community, chambers of commerce, to take advantage of this opportunity for tourism moving forward. So they are having conversations around that as we move forward.
Okay. Any questions from anyone on any of these issues? All right, thank you very much for all your work on this, subcommittees. It's a big job, and hopefully, by mid-time this year, we'll have some concrete ideas on how to navigate some of this. Okay, it's now time public comment. I don't know if anyone's here from the public. Oh,
I think
you're back.
Yes, good morning and Happy New Year to everyone. For the record, I know there are people listening off-site. My name is Sylvester Salcido from Orange, and I apologize for coming late, but Orange had a 2-hour delay, and my daughter insisted I bring her to school today because she had their special word to share with her classmates, which is eleemosynary. I don't know if everybody's familiar with eleemosynary, but it's a very loaded word politically. But anyway, I wanted to just share with all of you this morning some thoughts I had from the last time I was here. And the first issue I wanted to bring out, and I noticed that you changed the logo to non-flags, but I noticed that the flags, I don't know who did the graphics on this, and I'm sure it's a very innocent issue, but most of the flags are European. And I think there's one flag that I can't really make out because of the sizing, but it looks like it's Pakistan's flag. So otherwise, I think you have Spain, Russia, Portugal, Italy, or it's Ireland if it's orange. Germany, looks like Holland, the US, and of course China. But I just thought that maybe in the future, I don't know who your graphics person is. Oh, yes.
So just to let you know, those are the languages that the website is able to easily translate into.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's
all right.
what
Well,
those
then
flags represent.
That's one explanation. Thank you very much for sharing that. But anyway, I just thought, not to crowd the whole thing with the whole, 186 flags in the world. But, so that was one thing. And the other thing I wanted to share also is, of course, being Filipino-American, I'm plugging the Philippines in this celebration. And just to note that of all the countries in the world, the Philippines is the one country that was under American control for almost 50 years, which is about one-fifth of our 250 years. And I just wanted to share briefly that I'm 67 today, so back in 1976, I was about 19 years old. And I remember going with a college friend because he lived in Acton, Massachusetts, so Concord was right next door. And we went to see all the bicentennial celebrations. But I remembered somebody making a comment to me that since we were just waking up from a beer and marijuana fog, they said, Sylvester, you don't really have to go because this really isn't about Filipinos. It's about 1776, it's about Americans. And of course, I never really thought much of it, but I did go back to bed. But now in remembering that event, I was just thinking, all the images of all the celebrations and ceremonies back in 76, you had this iconic three men with a flag, the fife and drummer marching along. And so obviously no Filipinos in that image. And I see now, 50 years later, we're all struggling with trying to embrace this whole issue of DEI, right? So in Orange, I am in front of the Board of Education every month as much as I can be there trying to push for DEI. And as you know from education point of view, it's very contentious. It's rough and tumble out on the front lines. So one of the things I would just recommend today is just that I think we should get the conversation out now, even 2.5 years before the actual day, whether this is a ceremony, a celebration, a commemoration, because I just really think it would be helpful for all the work that all of you are doing, rather than meeting like this every quarter, and then suddenly you find yourself with this huge protest and upheaval, and everybody says, oh, you guys are all doing this and that and the other. So I think, again, just one guy from Orange, my recommendation is to get it out now and just let all the controversy bubble up. And what I find is, you ask them, how would you commemorate it or celebrate it? What would you name it? What would you call the 250th birthday of the United States? I think there's a lot of great things that can really come out of it. And that's why I'm really excited about all the work that all of you are doing. So I know it's way past, it's 12:01. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to just contribute from the peanut gallery here every now and then. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
And happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
That's a great contribution, Sylvester. Thank you very much.
Gallery later.
Great perspective.
Yeah, it's orange.
All right. We are 1 minute past noon, so I'm assuming we have no further business unless anyone wants to bring up something for the good of the future order.
Cindy, is there anybody else online?
Anyone else online? All right. So I don't think I need to ask for a motion to adjourn, but I may as well. So somebody have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, second? Great, thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, your point about the meeting.
This is our approach.
I know.
Hi, how are you?
And I think we can start right in